So now that season 2 of Galavant has finally ended, it is now time for me to review this season of Galavant, which I am so happy to do because um I obviously really want to review for you guys, but let me just start off this review by talking about season 1 because I feel like I can't talk about this season and how different it was without talking about season 1. Season 1, when it came out, I thought was a very strong first season. It wasn't great. It really wasn't. And honestly, it wasn't that memorable. It had songs that I thought were just too short and didn't get to really do what they wanted. It had out of place references and things like that. And it just, in the long run, its 8 episode run did not really benefit it. And I really didn't think that it was going to get season 2. When it was announced that there was going to be a season 2, I was quite, surprised because it had such bad ratings and it was meant to be billed as a comedy extravaganza, and I really didn't know if it was going to work. But to my surprise, not only does season 2 hold up, it is so much better than season 1. Season 1 doesn't even compare to season 2. They did so much more with this season, and it's clear that their renewal really, I think, made them more confident. There are two things that I think completely elevate this season among the other, and they're very small. And season 2 of Galavant is near perfect, honestly. I thought this season was amazing. So much better than season 1. There are very, very small problems with season 2. And when I mean small, I mean like very small. Like they barely affect my enjoyment of this season. Pretty much I loved this season. But let me just get into it because, like I said, I think there are two things that really work so well in this season. First of all, they are a lot more confident. You can definitely tell that they, this season, are not just bleeping out things, they are blatantly pointing things out. They're telling you, yes, we are making fun of this, and instead of them just randomly throwing a political reference, like pop culture references, they reference it in the story. Like, they talk about how, oh, this happened, and it works so much better, and it doesn't feel random. It feels like it belongs there because it goes with the wackiness of the show. The show really, I think, embraced how cheesy it can be, and I think they did a very good job with that. This show needs to be over the top or it's not going to work, and I think they really realized that this season. Especially starting off with the first episode, which is called A New Season, aka Suck It Cancellation Bear. I mean, it doesn't get more self-aware than that. It really doesn't, and this entire season is extremely meta, extremely self-aware, and I love that. But the one thing that I think worked even better than season 1, the thing that I think worked the most this season, that did work last season to a degree, but I just thought this season was so much stronger, were the character dynamics. Last season, it was Galavant, Isabella, and Sid going off on these adventures to try to rescue Madalena, who was secretly scheming with Richard, and Gareth was in the mix as well. And while that was strong, at times it definitely got very tedious. There were times where it was just Sid, Isabella, and Galavant at each other's throats. Galavant was very cocky, and then this season, they completely changed that because, as we know, at the end of last season, Galavant and Richard kind of went on their own, and basically, because Richard wants to kind of discover himself and to be rescued because obviously Richard's no longer king. And basically, they went on their own while Isabella is with Gwen, while Sid went with Madalena and Gareth, and Isabella is in the meantime locked in that like prison that her cousin put her in, which I can't remember his name right now. I really can't. But her cousin put her in, and she is stuck with Gwen and Chef. So they really did a great job at changing these dynamics, and these dynamics are just so much stronger than season 1. That's the thing that works so well here. It's not so much they change up the dynamics, it's just they're so much stronger and they show so much more potential. And guys, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, let's really delve deep into this season because when I say there's a lot to talk about, there is a lot that happened this season. Let me just first talk about how great that number, A New Season, is because it's such a great way to start off this season. I mean, the fact that this was billed as an 8 episode comedy extravaganza and then it gets renewed for season 2 is very funny because it was billed as an event series, yet it has a season 2, and the fact they're making fun of that I think is great. The fact they're telling you to watch it over the Golden Globes I think is hilarious. Just all of that is so great. It's so meta. Sid spoiling the ending of the season in the first episode is great. And in other shows, I'd be like, that's a real cop out. But here it just works so well because they're not afraid to say, yeah, we just spoiled it, but who cares? We're going to move along with the plot anyway and show you how the events lead up to that. And I love that. Just amazing first number. Loved it. And it was 4 minutes, guys. 4 minutes, and I love that. And I'll get into the musical numbers a little bit later. But let's just first talk about our main stuff here with Richard and Galavant. One of the greatest pairings, I think, on TV right now, honestly. Season 1, we did not get to see this because Richard, of course, was supposed to be the villain, but he kind of realized last season that he wasn't really a villain. So, him and Galavant, they've now met up with pirates, as we know, and they end up finally hitting land, but their ship sinks, and basically Galavant and Richard are forced to go on their own without the pirates. They end up going to this bar called the Enchanted Forest, which is forbidden, but it ends up being a gay bar, which I think is hilarious. And I thought that was definitely very well done. And yes, that was a little bit silly, but I thought it worked very well there. And eventually, though, they get out of there, they meet up, and they decide to go on their adventure together. And you can definitely tell that Galvin and Richard, they're butting heads a lot, obviously, mainly because of Richard just being really annoying, obviously. He doesn't really realize that. But Richard, in the meantime, he wants to get his land back. He wants to still be king, obviously, because he feels like that was taken away from him and he wants to get it back. But basically what ends up happening is they go to this place and there's this sword that Richard just casually pulls out and he doesn't really think anything of it. And that sword is actually the hero's sword, which we eventually find out a little bit later. But Richard now has the hero's sword, which means he's going to be the one king to unite them all. He's going to be the one to conquer and stop the battle and, basically to bring everyone to justice. And I definitely really like seeing that. So basically, after this happens, they go out on their own. They basically try to get allies for Isabella. Nobody seems to volunteer except for this one girl, Roberta. Roberta is Richard's childhood friend, and they really did a great job of this. Now, oh, I forgot to say though, when they come back to his kingdom, Richard finds his kingdom has completely disappeared. There are these people that have basically renovated, they've completely revamped it, and this really, I think, is one of the best decisions they made all season because it really gets to show how vulnerable Richard is when you take everything away from him. He's now been stripped of his crown, he's no longer king, he's been, stuck with Galavant, and now he's forced to really make a decision of what he wants to do, and I really think that's summed up very well in the song If I Were a Jolly Blacksmith that he sings, where he's kind of realizing that there's nothing else he can really do. He doesn't really know what he can be except for a king because that's what he's been his whole life. And he doesn't really know how to be anything else. And it's really sad, honestly, because you want Richard to be happy and things like that. And I think they really showed that Richard genuinely wanted to be king. And this is something that he genuinely wanted. And now he doesn't really know what to do with himself. And I definitely really like that. Roberta definitely, though, is the one that gives him confidence. And Roberta's someone that, like I said, he's known from his childhood, and you can tell right away that there is definitely chemistry between these two. Galavant sees it right away. He tries to get these two together, and I love how Galavant basically just goes all out to try to get these two together. Very good stuff. I definitely really enjoyed that, and eventually they do get together and everything, which I thought was very sweet. I like this relationship between Roberta and Richard, and I was worried this was going to be rushed, but no, it really worked. You really see these two as being childhood friends who are suddenly getting very closer and really see each other as more than friends, and I definitely really like that. And the actress that played Roberta, I really loved. I wish she was around the first season. They really made it like, oh, she was all, they made it seem like she was already around. They did a very good job with that, I think. But basically, then what ends up happening is Galvin and Richard have this little fight when Richard gets attached to this lizard, Tad Cooper, who he believes is a dragon, but nobody else does. More on that later. We'll definitely get into that. Tad Cooper was definitely a big star this season. I think we all really love Tad Cooper. Another really great number from Richard. The My Dragon Pal and Me, just really love that. And they get into a little fight with giants and dwarves, which are the same exact size, and just so much great stuff there. I really love that. Very funny. But Roberta ends up breaking it up, forcing the two to put aside their differences and go on their road together, where they meet Galavant's father. His name is, I can't remember his name right now, but we find out that Galavant's name is actually his last name, and I thought that was interesting that we found this out. Now, Galavant thinks that his father is this nasty coward and just is this horrible man, but he finds out that he's actually helped these kids, and his father's a lot better than he thought he was. It's just his father was never nice to him or whatever, and maybe he was the problem. So, very interesting stuff there. I like the way we explored this relationship between Galavant and his father. The show definitely got a lot deeper when it came to relationships, and you really saw that with Galavant and his father. His father was never really there for him, and he really always did care about his son. It's just Galavant didn't really see it, and I thought it was very sweet, and I really liked their scenes together. I think it really made Galavant think of his father differently, and I really did enjoy seeing that. It really gave character development to Galavant. I definitely really liked that, and I thought that was definitely very strong stuff. So they then end up reuniting with Sid. I'll get to what happens with Sid later, but he ends up putting a sword into Galavant's like arteries and almost killing Galavant. And of course, Sid's a screw up, so it doesn't surprise me that he would do that. So they have to take Galavant to the Neo of Sporin, which, oh my god, I cannot tell you guys how great that is. The Neo of Sporin, that is genius. I can't talk about how great that is. Neo of Sporin, that is awesome. But basically, they take him to the Neo of Sporin, where he is healed, basically, and, at first not healed, but the Neo of Sporin eventually does heal Galavant. They get out of there, basically, and they find out that there is going to be a war, and I can't talk about anything else that happens this season without diving right into Madalena and Gareth and Sid. I gotta talk about that because nothing else in this review will make sense unless I talk about what happens there. Now, Gareth and Madalena. Almost as amazing as Richard and Galavant, if not better. These two, I don't know why they didn't have scenes together in the first place, because they just work so well together. Vinnie Jones is, masculinism, and Mallory Jensen's feminism and power just bounce off of each other so well. And I loved Gareth this season. I think last season, Gareth was really great, but he didn't really have anything significant to do, and this season really makes note of that. Gareth all season is basically trying to find his place. He doesn't really know for the first episode at least, he's trying to find his place because, of course, Richard left, and he doesn't really know what to do now. So eventually, he decides to be king. He basically literally demands to be king, and Madalena gives in to his demands, and basically at first they clash because they really have very different ideas, but they start to get very close, and they do this really great thing with Madalena that I personally really admired, I have to say, because at first like I said, they're not really getting along and things like that, and I thought that this was just going to be a silly thing, but they did this one episode with Madalena where we see her, she goes to her childhood bullies, actually. She was bullied as a child, because there were these women that were not as rich, that were much richer than she was, and they basically ridiculed her for it. And we see she goes back, she's literally roasted by all of these girls, and she has this song called What Am I Feeling? Now, this song, guys, is a genuine moment. It's not meant to be funny, it's meant to be genuine, and it really, I think, is one of the things that just elevates this season over the other. There were no serious moments last season, not a single one, and this season had them, and I love that. I thought it was very strong that they did this. It just really showed that Madalena does have emotions. She's not just this evil person. She does have emotions, but she just doesn't really understand them, because it's clear she's never really been sad before over anything in a long time, and I really felt for Madeleine there. And of course, while she is the villain of this show, and Gareth is as well, you really do feel for these two characters. And eventually, Gareth realizes that he starts to love Madalena. And when he cut off the ears of those women and gave her the earrings, I thought that's just so Gareth. It's awesome that he did that. But he starts to feel genuine attraction towards Madalena, and at first he doesn't really know what to do because he's never really felt this before. And Sid tries to be his wingman wingman and help him out, which Sid as working for Gareth and Madalena I thought was great. The way that he tried to get these two to come to a decision I thought was hilarious, and I love that. But basically, he starts to feel genuine attraction towards her, and you don't know if Madalena feels the same way. There's one part where it even seems like he's about to propose to her, but he doesn't. And Gareth has this great song called Love Makes the World Brand New, complete like out of Disney stuff with like a bouncing ball and everything, just a bouncing bird actually, very much remind me of Disney sing-along songs. Hilarious stuff there, really love that. And now I need to talk about what happened with Isabella, because the rest of their plot line won't make sense unless I talk about Isabella, because eventually it all connects, obviously. Isabella, as we know, at the end of last season, was locked in this prison, basically, from her cousin, forced to marry him, and obviously she thinks this is ridiculous. She's tried to escape several times, it's not working for her, nothing really seems to be working at all, and obviously she longs for Galavant to return, and she eventually tries to get the key. She tries to get Chef and Gwen to get her out, because they don't really like what's going on either, which Chef and Gwen definitely had a lot more to do this season as well, which they definitely really emphasized on, because I think they really saw what the viewers liked last season, and Chef and Gwen surprisingly was one of the best parts of last season. I never expected these two characters to be as great as they were, but they really are fantastic. They're great characters, and they really gave them more to do here. They have a little side plot with them trying to basically figure out what they need to do. Eventually, they end up leaving because they just need to get away from all the violence and all the drama. They kind of just want to go away, get their own house in the countryside, which I thought that was sweet that they did that. But basically, Isabella tries to escape, but then something happens with Galavant, because Galavant tries to contact her on this, what their version of a cell phone is, which that was hilarious. The way they were basically making fun of cell phones in their own way, I thought was hilarious. But what ends up happening here, and at first I really didn't like this, but I do have to say that they really got into the plots of Galavant and Isabella, because there's this song they sing called World's Best Kiss, and they start to realize that maybe their first kiss wasn't all that great. Maybe it wasn't memorable. Maybe they really don't love each other, and they're trying to kind of figure out, was this really true love? Is this really something that, are they really meant to be together? And I was just like, damn, this is getting really deep, honestly. I never expected Galavant to get this deep into their relationship, but it really did. I mean, it really focused on, are these two really meant for each other? And I think they did that very, very well. The problem comes when Galavant is on, you know how Isabella has that necklace that obviously has that like thing where you can view kind of like FaceTime, but like in their times. So Galavant finds this thing, I don't remember what it is, but it's this thing to contact her with, and the connection ends up being really bad, and Isabella mispronounces what Galavant says. She thinks he says to go, that she should go die in a brown fart, which is pretty hilarious, but the rest of the season, she pretty much believes that Galavant wants nothing to do with her. She goes back into her castle where she goes to sulk, and I will say that this felt very out of character, and for a while I really wasn't into Isabella's arc, because it didn't really seem like she was in character here. Because eventually this wedding planner, Wormwood, is introduced, and Wormwood is the most over-the-top wedding planner you can meet, who secretly is set on world domination. He is very evil, he has this plan, we don't know what he really wants to do, but he eventually cohorts Isabella into wearing this crown, which basically controls her. She ends up sending her parents to the dungeon. She ends up making all these crazy decisions. She genuinely, makes it seem like she wants to marry her cousin, and eventually she realizes what's happening to her, which I'm glad that that didn't last long, because honestly, I didn't really think that was working. I didn't like seeing Isabella out of character, weak like this, and I understand that obviously she loved Galavant and everything, but just seeing her like this and how strong she was last season, it very much fell out of character. So when she goes to visit this other princess, who basically reminds Isabella that you're not some hoity-toity princess, you are a lot stronger than that, and you know that, this reminds Isabella that, holy shit, I've been under a spell this whole time, and basically She takes the crown off. She banishes Wormwood, which Wormwood's exit was hilarious. When Wormwood left saying, I have this dark plan, but then being the wedding planner on the side, I thought was hilarious, and all of that was great. He goes to Madalena and Gareth, and basically they decide to declare war. That's what he wants to do. He wants to declare war. So basically the rest of the season is everyone declaring war, and I loved how strong Isabella got here. I mean, she goes full on like wanting to defend Hortensia because no one else wants to do it. She wants to be the one to defend Hortensia. She has this huge thing with Madalena, this huge battle that they have, which was awesome. I loved their rap battle. I thought that was hilarious. But she lies to Madalena saying that she has the hero's sword and that she's going to be, that Hortensia is going to conquer Valencia, which she doesn't really know if that's true or not. But meanwhile, Gareth and Richard, they're on their way. Roberta, at the last minute, decides she doesn't want to be with Galavant and Richard. She doesn't want to go on this fight. She just doesn't want all the combat and things like that, and she doesn't think it's the best thing for Richard. So she ends up leaving them, and basically they go on their fight. And now let's talk about the season finale. Because obviously that's where we've gotten to. So if you guys haven't seen the season finale, don't watch the rest of this review because I'm going to spoil the entire season finale. Now, let me just say, guys, that is how you do a season finale. I mean, I think really last season, it was kind of just like, we will do more if you want us to. And this season was very much like that too, but it was definitely a lot more closure. That's something I didn't really feel last season. I didn't really feel like we had closure. It felt like there was another episode the next week, and there obviously wasn't. Here, it really felt like they had a full-fledged story, they had an ending, and I really liked that. And I thought the ending here was great. I loved everything that happened. Basically, first of all, dropping the recaps this season, the Galavant recaps, I think really worked for the show because something that always happened last year is that they do the recap and then the episode would be very, very rushed. So dropping it and saving the story, I thought worked very, very well because it didn't rush anything. And while the season was a lot more fast-paced, it just worked so much better, and I really enjoyed that. So giving the recap back in the last episode, I thought was a very smart decision, and the fact that this time, though, that we actually saw the Jester, we didn't just see a recap, we saw the Jester, we saw them clapping, and we saw him reference the recap over and over again throughout the episode. I thought was hilarious, and I love that. Basically, the war starts, and Wormwood in the previous episode had introduced Madalena to something called the Dedu, which is the dark, dark, evil way, which Gareth is definitely not into at all. He is, makes his opinion known that he does not want to do this. He wants to be evil, but not this evil, and it's clear that Madalena does not feel the same way. She goes with the Dedu anyway, and this really is a challenge for Gareth and Madalena, because she wants this to do, she's very dark, and she's very powerful, while Gareth really isn't set on it. He doesn't like it, and he doesn't think it's a good idea, but these two have gone together. They basically do like each other at this point, and what ends up happening is Galavant and his zombie army, they get a zombie army of all things, which I think is pretty hilarious, honestly. I forgot to say that they do have a zombie army. They go to face all of them, and he does have this reunion with Isabella when he found out that Isabella didn't love him when he was, when he found out what Isabella thinks she doesn't love him. At first, she slaps him, but he tells her that he loves her and that it didn't mean anything, and they very quickly meet up, and she tells him that she's over it, and I like that there wasn't any drama there, because she knows that Galavant's telling the truth. She knows that he wouldn't lie to her, and I really love that. And basically, by the way, I forgot to say that Sid was pretty much shunned by Galavant, because Galavant obviously was upset with what Sid did with the sword and everything, so he doesn't really trust him right now. But basically, they go to face Madalena, and their reunion with Madalena I thought was great. And Madalena's line, how they've all been divided all season, just so meta. Again, so meta, and it's just so great. I just love little things like that. It's just so great. Richard is there as well, obviously, with Tag Cooper, and I love how Galavant genuinely told him that he's gone from this very innocent, like, childlike presence to a very strong, hero, and I love that Galavant said that, because I didn't really know if Galavant really cared about Richard the whole season, but I think this really showed that, and I definitely really like that. There were definitely moments that showed that, but there were moments where I'm like, I don't really know if Galavant really trusts Richard here, and that he really thinks he's a hero, but this shows that no, Galavant does think he's a hero. He thinks he really is a lot stronger than Richard thinks he is, and I really love seeing that. Very strong stuff there. They end up, basically, Madalena ends up doing the dark evil way, which turns the zombie army against them, and basically, we leave on a cliffhanger, which was hilarious. I love the way that was done. Then we go to the actual finale, where Sid does come back with the gay bar of all things. He comes back with the gay bar, and I love how they didn't get back any of the guest stars, which I'll get to the guest stars a little bit later. Definitely the guest stars were a lot better this season. I'll definitely get into that. But basically, the gay army and the zombie army, they basically start going at it, and what ends up happening is Isabella confronts Madalena. They have a whole thing, which their confrontations were just so great. But Richard's confrontation with Wormwood was truly badass. I love this. I thought this was awesome. Galavant faces Wormwood, and at first it doesn't really go well because, not Galavant, I mean, Richard faces Wormwood, and basically, Richard, of course, we don't know that he doesn't know that the hero's sword is the hero's sword, but eventually, Wormwood explains to him he has the hero's sword, and Richard basically is ready to face him, but basically, Wormwood ends up basically killing Tad Cooper at first. We think that he killed Tad Cooper. He eventually realizes that Tad Cooper isn't dead, but Richard's line of "you killed one dragon, but you've awakened another," you know that he is ready. This is his moment. All season long, he hasn't felt like a hero. He's felt like there's been something wrong with him. He's just felt off. And finally now, he's going to uprise. He's going to be the one to save them, and just his moment where he saves them is awesome. It felt like something we have been building to all season long, and I absolutely love that. Him defeating Wormwood, being the one to take the sword and unite them all, I thought was fantastic. And the fact that they're all shocked about it was just great, and I love that. And Richard is a badass. He really went from this really weenie villain to a much more powerful hero, and I just love seeing that. His development was so great and so strong there. Just such a great way for him to go out. And Wormwood being knocked out in the Wilhelm scream, that was great. And then basically what ends up happening is the fight's over. Basically, because Wormwood has been defeated, the zombie army stops, and the fight's pretty much over. But Gareth and Madalena are very complicated now, because Gareth really doesn't want this. He wants them to be together, and he wants to be evil, but not the way that Madalena does. She wants to be dark evil, and obviously that's not something that he's very comfortable with. And you see that Madalena just wants this. She loves Gareth, but she loves being evil more, and it's actually very sad. I really did feel bad for these two, because you want them together. And again, they are supposed to be the villains, but you just care about them so well because they develop their characters so well. That's definitely something they focus more on this season, is their characters, and I think they did that so much better this season than they did last season. I didn't really care as much about their characters last season, but I really do now. I just saw them as villains, but here I see them as actual people who are going through this problem, and Madeleine, I think, is just addicted to evil. That's who she'll always be. There's nothing she can do to get away from that, and it's really sad. But basically, Galavant and Isabella, in the meantime, they decide to get married, and it was a very, very sweet moment. I love when Wormwood basically was the one, just before he died, is after he dies, he wakes up, he once again is that wedding planner who tells him a place to go. They end up meeting up with the monks. The monks marry them, very sweet stuff there, and basically they decide, and Richard, in the meantime, does go to Roberta, which he had one of the funniest moments all season, where he was driving too fast on his horse, and he's like, "I'm sorry, officer, I didn't know it was going too fast." That had me in stitches. Also, the episode before, where they said this is not Game of Thrones, yeah, it's clear that they're trying to make fun of that, and I love that. Just so great. I loved all of that. Basically, Richard does tell Roberta that he doesn't need to be a hero, all he needs is her. Very sweet moments. Richard, Roberta, and Galavant and Isabella, they basically decided they don't want to be facing dragons and being heroes. They kind of just want to live a life of peace, and that's what they decided to do. They decided to kind of be in a seclusion, but we see that there, if this show is getting renewed, that's not going to last long because Madalena is being exposed to the DEL, which is the Dark Evil Lair, basically, and we don't know what this man wants, but at first it seems like this man also, like Wormwood, he has accessories, which I think is very funny, so we'll have to see what happens with Madalena. And Tad Cooper, in the meantime, we find out, is a full-fledged dragon, and that's basically how this season ends. That's everything that happened this season, and what a great season it really was. I mean, all of that plot was just so great. Let's talk about the guest stars this season. I know this video is going to be long, guys, but I don't want to just cut it short. I want to talk about my genuine love for this show. In fact, I forgot to say, this became one of my favorite shows to watch, honestly. Out of all the shows I'm watching, this was one of my favorites. I always tune in, I'm like, I can't wait for Galavant. It's going to be so great. Even while watching Grease Live, I'm like, I can't wait for the season finale of Galavant. It's going to be so great. The guest stars this season, they got our complaints, because my complaints last season is that the guest stars really took away from the plot. It seemed like they were just every episode last season, guest star, guest star, guest star, guest star, had no point to the plot whatsoever. Now, yes, the gay bar didn't really seem like it served much substance, but it actually did at the end, and I love that. So they go to the gay bar, which that was really because Kylie Minogue is engaged to Joshua Sassi, you know, the main star who plays Galavant, and they obviously want some scenes with her. I thought it was very funny, though. I love that the Enchanted Forest was a gay bar. It just makes so much sense, and I love that. I thought that was very funny. And the fact that Richard didn't really know what was going on is even funny, alright? I love that. The giants and dwarves, they served a purpose, which I definitely really love. They definitely served a purpose, because the purpose was for Galavant and Richard to sort out their differences and come to, a halt on how they really feel about each other, and I really love that. And of course, Galavant's father, he really served a purpose as well. Even the princess, the princess that Isabella encounters, they all really did serve a purpose in the end. I think they did that very, very well. That was a problem I had last season, that the guest stars just seemed like they were simply guest stars. And this season, it seemed like they weren't just random people that they were meeting. They actually needed to be in the plots for it to move ahead, and I really love that. They did a very good job with that. The script of this season, like I said, was so much more meta. I can't tell you guys how many funny moments there were. Just the songs in general. Let's talk about the songs, because I found the songs to be so much better this season. And not that the songs weren't good last season. I think the songs were very strong. It's just they were really too short. It really was. And when, like I said before last season, when you have a song that's a minute long, it's not all that memorable. Most times songs that are a minute long are like reprises and things you've heard before. And yeah, they did that this season, which even those I thought were very strong. It was just that they were more confident this season. They really exposed with more material. And yeah, they did the standard show tunes, but what I love the most, guys, and something I think you guys loved as well, are the nods. Not just nods, but them literally saying that we are making fun of this musical and we don't care what you think of it and we are ripping it off is hilarious. I mean, they rip off Les Mis and West Side Story in the same episode. Well, no, they rip off West Side Story in one episode, and then directly after they rip off Les Mis. And I'm doing Les Mis right now in my school. It's my school musical, but it was so great to have these references in here. It made for such a strong song, and the songs work. It doesn't feel like they're just ripping it off. It feels like it just makes sense, and it's funny. And what they did this season is that every lyric of the songs you have to listen to really get the jokes, and I love that. Finally, as well, that song, I mean, it's really hard to pick a favorite this season because they're all just so great. From the first song, A New Season, which is just such a great way to start the season. I couldn't think of a better way to start it, to, you know, things like Giants versus Dwarves, which is literally like Jets versus Sharks in West Side Story, but it's awesome because they're actually doing it, and it's just great that they're actually doing this, and it just works so well. I think they utilized all the songs so well. They really, I think, were a lot more well realized, and the songs never felt like they were taking away from the story. It felt like they were making the story stronger, and a lot of the songs were more character confrontations than they were just random things, and things like If I Were a Jolly Black blacksmith, things like goodbye. Goodbye is one of the most deep things that Galavant has done, because that is the moment where Galavant thinks he's gonna die, and he has these deep conversations with everyone. But they're also funny because of Galavant's response, like what Roberta says, seems as though we just said hi, and Galavant just saying, well, we did. Just things like that is so funny, and every lyric, if you need to break them down and listen to them, they're hilarious. They really are, and it's clear that they spend so much time on these songs and tried to make them so much better. And they didn't just they didn't bullshit anything. They didn't half-ass anything. They didn't bullshit anything. They went for it, and because of them going for it, that's why the season was so good. Like I said, this show is all or nothing. You have to give it your all, or you just quit, because that's how this show is going to work. You need to either show that you know what you're doing and that you're going to go all out, or you're just not going to work. And I gotta give it to Alan Menken, because even though the songs last season were great, the songs this season were just so much better. Alan Menken clearly knows musicals, and obviously he does because of Disney, but he didn't just try to make it Disney. He tried to do other things. He expanded new territory. He even did a rap number, which was hilarious. I love that. And every song this season was so great. They all had different styles to them, and I love that. I couldn't wait for the songs every episode, and they all were just so great. And the last episode, A Good Day to Die, was awesome. I love that. The love song between Galavant and Isabella I thought was great. Both of the ones they have this season are great, especially World's Best Kiss. That really, like I said, gets into their relationship of them wondering, was this the world's best kiss? And just everything about the season was so much deeper. The production design was definitely there more. And like I said, the pop culture references really worked a lot better because they made reference to them. Like, for example, Isabella reading the letter of when the war is going to happen. It says Sunday at 8/7 Central, set your DVR, and them not knowing what a DVR is hilarious. Just little things like that. Them realizing the time period and realizing that really doesn't make sense, but we're going to do it anyway. Those are the things that make this season work so well. And I don't know if this season's going to be renewed for a season 3. I don't think they need it, but they did set it up where there is still stuff that could happen if there is a season 3. They didn't close it completely. You know, Tag Cooper's a dragon. Madalena is going to be exposed to dark magic, and Gareth, like, oh, I forgot to say, Gareth is out to look for her. Gareth is going with Sid. He's going to be his squire to look for Isabella, and I hope that works out very well. But overall, guys, I just love this season so much more than last season. I thought the season was a lot more entertaining, a lot more enjoyable, and a lot more deep as well. Like I said, there were some really genuine moments that I really didn't think they were going to go into, but they really surprised me with the character development, the songs, everything was there. Let me know what you guys saw this season of Galavant. I know I've really been just, you know, pouring my heart out and going on and on about how I feel about this. I'm really getting into it, but I don't want to hold back. I want to show my genuine love for this show, because when Galavant was first announced, this is what I thought it was going to be, not Season 1. Season 1, I think, was just some ideas that they had showing the potential, but this really showed that the show is so much more than we thought it was in Season 1, and I absolutely love that, and I just can't believe that a half-hour comedy show just got so deep, got into the characters, expanded the songs. They just did everything a second season should do, and it made for such a more entertaining season. This honestly might be in my top 10, guys. It might just be, because it is some of the most fun that you can have on TV right now. It is some of the best characters, I think, on TV, and I just loved it so much more. But overall, guys, in the comments, let me know what you guys thought of this season of Galavant. How did it compare to Season 1? I don't think it even compares. I think Season 2 was just so much better. There's not even a contest. You don't even need to ask me what season was better, because I know Season 2 was better, okay? I can just tell you straight out. Season 2 is better. I enjoyed it so much more. Let me know what you guys saw this season. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of The X-Files, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.